Retiring Well, brought to you by Centennial Wealth Advisory, financial advisors specializing in retirement planning and serving all of Northern Michigan. Retiring Well, helping you plan for a successful and comfortable retirement. Retiring Well, plan to retire well.
Welcome to our show. Listen, today we're going to be talking about Medicaid planning, and I'm here with a special guest, Mike Swogger, principal partner in Swogger, Bruce and Millar, right here in Traverse City.
Yeah, they haven't gotten rid of me yet.
All right. Mike, I want to talk about Medicaid planning, but before we do, tell me a little bit about what is traditional estate planning.
Sure. First of all, welcome back. I've been here before, and it's always a pleasure to be here to talk with you and your guests. I do estate planning, which primarily is the preparation of a person's estate plan, be it a will, a trust, powers of attorney, getting their ducks in a row for the final disposition of their assets. And so we've talked about that before, and I know your listeners and viewers might be familiar with that, whereby they come into our office, we prepare their will or their trust so that their assets are organized so that when they pass away, there's an orderly disposition of their assets to their loved ones. You and I have been talking lately about what other parts of law do you practice in your firm that dovetails with that. And the topic today we're going to talk about with my partner Courtney Marshall, who's here, has to do with the world of Medicaid planning. The reason being that many times clients come in and they're concerned either themselves or their parents someday are going to probably need to live in a nursing home. And nursing homes are very expensive to live in. I think today you're paying somewhere between $7,000 and $10,000 a month for a nursing home. And so people are concerned that either A, we don't have those kinds of assets to be able to pay for that, or B, we do have assets, but we would rather figure out, is there a way that we can preserve those assets for our loved ones and pre-qualify for Medicaid so that Medicaid pays for the nursing home? And the answer is maybe. And that's where Courtney Marshall comes in. She focuses a large part of her legal practice, in addition to wills and trusts, on meeting with clients to figure out, is there a way we can create a plan so that your house can be preserved for your loved ones and or a substantial amount of your liquid assets, your IRA, your retirement savings, your investments, your stocks and bonds can be preserved so that when you go into a nursing home, those assets don't have to be used for that. They can instead be parked somewhere so that when you then go into the nursing home and eventually pass away, your loved ones inherit that.
Right.
And there are ways to do that. So like with anything else, if you plan and you have a plan, there's a good possibility that we can save those assets or the majority of those assets or a large part of those assets for your loved ones. If you don't plan, there's not much we can do. And people don't really know about a lot of this, and that's why we have people like Courtney Marshall to educate people for that purpose.
Right. Now, Mike, we've got estate planning, right?
Yes.
And then you've got this Medicaid planning, right? Is looking to see if you can't maybe preserve some of the assets, and then have Medicaid pay for some of that care, right? Can that planning be done at the same time?
Yes, it's a good idea and that's when the discussion should be taking place, whether it's too early, premature, or whatnot, or just so you at least know the options that are available. That's a good time to have that discussion. And so oftentimes we'll do that. We'll meet with them, do the estate plan, and then schedule them to come back to meet with Courtney to do that sort of planning.
And you said earlier that that's Courtney's sole focus?
It's not her sole focus, but it is a large portion of her focus.
Okay, so she's doing a lot of these.
Yes.
All right, well, she's somebody we definitely want to talk to. So I want you to stay tuned because we're going to have Courtney join us and we're going to dive in more specifically to this Medicaid planning. So stay tuned.
Every success story starts with a plan. The success of your retirement depends on a solid financial plan. If you are nearing retirement or already retired, we invite you to an informative live event to help you plan to retire well. There is no cost and no obligation, and dinner is on us. We are Centennial Wealth Advisory, financial professionals, specializing in retirement planning and serving all of northern Michigan with offices in Traverse City, Cadillac, Petoskey, and Gaylord. Our presentation includes highlights of the Tax Cuts and Job Act of 2017 and the big opportunity it presents over the next 7 years. The surviving spouse tax trap, how can you avoid it? How two similar portfolios can end up with two drastically different results. What's the definition of a bull market? Do you know your risk exposure? And much more. Call 888-608-5825 to register and choose the date and location that works best for you. Thursday, January 23rd at Big Buck Brewery in Gaylord, or Tuesday, January 28th at Lakeside Charlie's in Cadillac. The live event starts at 6 p.m. and is free to attend with a complimentary gourmet dinner to follow, but seating is limited and tends to fill quickly. Call 888-608-5825 to reserve your seats today. There is no cost and no obligation. Don't miss this important live event to help you plan to retire well. Call 888-608-5825 today.
We look forward to helping you plan to retire well.
Hi, welcome back. Listen, if you're just joining us, today we're talking about Medicaid planning, and I have two special guests with me today from Swogger, Bruce, and Millar, Mike Swogger and Courtney Marshall. Now, Mike, we were talking in the first segment, you were talking about, what kind of goes into estate planning, but yes, you kind of started talking a little bit about this Medicaid planning and how this is kind of a focus of Courtney's.
Exactly, and so I'll be briefer on this segment myself, and I'll turn it over to you and Courtney. But Courtney's going to explain how we meet with clients, again, when they're concerned about, is there a way we can protect our house through certain deeds and our assets so that we don't have to use those assets to afford a nursing home, and we can pre-qualify for Medicaid. So that's where Courtney focuses more than I do, so I'll turn it over to you two.
So Courtney, so when does this kind of planning begin?
Good question. The answer depends.
Okay.
And it depends on the family and what documents maybe mom and dad already have in place, what documents they are in need of. So if they've already been to see Mike and they have a power of attorney in place, then we sit down and we look at that power of attorney and say, does it give your agent, the person who's going to act for you if you become incapacitated, does it allow that person the ability to amend the estate plan? Does it allow the individual to apply for government benefits like Medicaid?
Gotcha.
So that's the first step.
Okay.
And if there's a question that maybe mom and dad, one or the other, are on the verge of needing long-term care and we're not sure if they have that plan or that document, and if the document's 8 to 10 years old, the probability is that it's not going to allow the agent the broad range of power that we need them to do.
Sure.
So at that point, if mom and dad come in, the first step would be just to update their power of attorney to make sure that going forward, we were able to do what we
Basically, who has authority to act on their behalf, right? And if they don't have it, then make sure they do get it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's kind of the first step, is making sure the durable power of attorney is updated.
Gotcha.
Similarly, if they have an existing joint trust, we want to make sure that that gives the sole spouse the ability to amend or fund assets in and out of the trust, because if it becomes irrevocable or not amendable on the incapacity of the first spouse, then we're stuck with that plan.
Gotcha.
So those are kind of the first preliminary questions to ask. As long as mom and dad still have capacity, we're able to make those necessary changes that when they end up in the home, we can do it.
Okay, so this is mom and dad, either or, looking to maybe already in assisted living, looking to go maybe into nursing home care, or just going directly into nursing home care, right?
And that is the important part, is I think there's this misconception that Medicaid covers assisted living, it covers private homes, and that's not the case.
Right.
So traditional Medicaid planning, or traditional Medicaid only covers skilled care in a nursing facility. So unless and until mom and dad reach that point of being medically eligible, we don't worry about financially, because they may never make it to the true skilled care setting.
And that's what's important too about that initial stage, is even if they never do need to actually have Medicaid planning done, having an updated power of attorney, making sure the trust is properly set up so that if they ever do need it in the future is vitally important, because that way, even if they do need it in the future, yet at that point in time they've become incapacitated or incompetent, Alzheimer's or dementia, their power of attorney now can do that planning for them. And so that's why, even if they don't need it now, it's important to have that plan put in place.
So if somebody with absolutely no estate plan, they could get ahead of this way early by having a lot of that stuff done ahead of time, right?
Correct.
Okay, good. Now, Courtney, so somebody wants Medicaid planning, they want to, as Mike talked about in the earlier segment, they want to preserve assets. Okay, now that's because they want to pass on more, right?
Right.
Or leave more for their spouse who maybe isn't going into nursing home care, right? Try to preserve as much of that as possible for them.
Correct.
Okay.
And the first main maybe takeaway point is, I often hear, I don't want my wife to be homeless.
There you go.
So the key terms for Medicaid are, the individual going into the nursing home is called the institutionalized spouse. It doesn't sound great, but that's what they call it. And then the spouse that remains at home is the community spouse. And so for Medicaid purposes, we separate the institutionalized spouse from the community spouse.
Gotcha.
And the community spouse is allowed to keep assets.
Okay, so as they're looking forward to this happening, can you give me some things that they, and maybe we can just talk about these in the next segment, but I'll just give you a heads up. What are things they shouldn't do
Perfect, yes.
prior to, this planning, and then things they should do once it happens, like, how do you spend down these assets, I think is what you call it, right?
Correct.
All right, we'll go in that in the next segment, so stay tuned.
Are you retired or approaching retirement in the next 5 to 10 years? Join the Centennial Wealth Advisory team for an exciting presentation with complimentary gourmet dinner and learn essential financial strategies for a comfortable retirement. Call 888-608-5825 to reserve your seats today. There is no cost and no obligation. Call 888-608-5825.
If you're retired or approaching retirement in the next 5 to 10 years, join us for an informative live event. This event is all about you, the challenges you face, and the information you need to help you build the future that you want. There's no pressure to become a client. Our goal is simply to give you valuable information that you can use to make smarter financial decisions. We hope that by the time you leave this event, you'll be one step closer to your retirement goals. Hi, welcome back. If you're just now joining us, I'm here with Mike Swogger and Courtney Marshall from Swogger, Bruce, and Millar, and we're talking about Medicaid planning. Now, in the earlier segment, Courtney, we wanted to start talking about what things they shouldn't do, okay, and then maybe some of the things they should. Can you elaborate on that?
The things you shouldn't do are almost as important as the things you should do. Okay. So one of the number one issues I see is mom and dad, one or the other, usually after the first spouse has passed away, the second spouse is then concerned about preserving the home and leaving it to a child. And so they go to the courthouse, do the do-it-yourself deed, and add child as a joint owner on their home. Then they enter the nursing home a year later, 2 years later, and the issue then becomes 2 years prior to entering the nursing home, they've now gifted half the equity value of their home to a child, and they're now going to be penalized by the state before Medicaid will kick in and pay the care costs. That child is either going to have to gift it back to mom or dad, or we're going to have to pay out of pocket the value essentially of the gift.
Gotcha.
And sometimes you say, it's not a big deal, I trust my child, they'll do the right thing and give it back. But then the pitfall is that child is then divorced. So their ex-spouse has an interest in mom or dad's property.
So what I also heard you say, and I've heard you guys in some of the meetings that I've had to be in with you, is that when you apply for Medicaid, there's is it a 5-year look back?
It is a 5-year look back.
Okay, so if they've done any gifting in that period of time, that's not a good thing, right? Because that's
correct.
That's not right.
And we have to disclose that on the application. And it's things even like you help pay a grandchild's tuition at private school. You have to disclose that. So that's not to say don't help out your grandchildren or your children. It's just be smart about it. And if somebody with a chronic illness may want to think twice before doing something like that.
Right.
But getting back with the deeding in the house, if mom comes to us and says, okay, spouse died, I want to leave this to my children, but I'm concerned about Medicaid. What other deeding may I do that won't penalize me? And that's where often Mike will already have drafted a ladybird deed or a transfer on death deed to the children. And the difference is during life, mom is still the sole legal owner. So there's no gifting issue.
All right. The other one I've heard that you want to be careful of in that 5-year period up is don't make a lot of cash payments, right? I mean, you want to have funds be well documented, because if it ever gets audited, right, they can exclude those as well, or call them gifting if you have no idea where it went.
They can. They have some strong resources to look into your financials. And so if there's any discrepancy and you, for whatever reason, paid $50,000 to redo the bathroom, the kitchen, hopefully, not the bathroom, that's going to be hard to reproduce those receipts or those bills afterwards.
All right. Can you think of anything else prior to actually applying for the Medicaid that they shouldn't do in that period of time?
You should not fill out. Often it's a very stressful time, obviously, for all family members when mom or dad has to enter the nursing home, and it's a difficult transition. And so sometimes in the heat of the moment, a social worker or somebody, the administrator at the facility will say, just fill out this Medicaid application and it'll help you. It often hurts you if we then have to unravel what you already submitted.
Got you.
So just maybe take a deep breath and say, I'll speak with an attorney and get back with you.
Yeah, so yeah, speak with an attorney first before you do anything, right?
Well, and not just any attorney. This is highly detailed law, and you really have to know what you're doing. And if you just go to a lawyer who doesn't necessarily know what they're doing, that's not going to help you. You need to go to somebody who knows what they're doing.
Good. Well, listen, in the last segment, what I want to do is start kind of doing a deep dive into now they're applying for Medicaid. How can they preserve those assets as we talked about earlier? So stay tuned. Much more.
If you are retired or soon to be retired, let us help you plan to retire well. Centennial Wealth Advisory specializes in retirement planning and has offices in Traverse City, Cadillac, Petoskey, and Gaylord. We'll never pressure anyone to become a client. Our goal is to inform and to educate. Simply attend one of our live events or schedule a meeting at one of our Northern Michigan office locations for a free, no-obligation retirement review. Every success story starts with a plan. The success of your retirement depends on a solid financial plan. If you are nearing retirement or already retired, we invite you to an informative live event to help you plan to retire well. There is no cost and no obligation, and dinner is on us. We are Centennial Wealth Advisory, financial professionals, specializing in retirement planning and serving all of Northern Michigan with offices in Traverse City, Cadillac, Petoskey, and Gaylord. Our presentation includes highlights of the Tax Cuts and Job Act of 2017 and the big opportunity it presents over the next 7 years. The surviving spouse tax trap, how can you avoid it? How two similar portfolios can end up with two drastically different results. What's the definition of a bull market? Do you know your risk exposure? And much more. Call 888-608-5825 to register and choose the date and location that works best for you. Thursday, January 23rd at Big Buck Brewery in Gaylord, or Tuesday, January 28th at Lakeside Charlie's in Cadillac. The live event starts at 6 p.m. and is free to attend with a complimentary gourmet dinner to follow, but seating is limited and tends to fill quickly. Call 888-608-5825 to reserve your seats today. There is no cost and no obligation. Don't miss this important live event to help you plan to retire well. Call 888-608-5825 today.
Again, welcome back. I'm here today. We're talking about Medicaid planning, and I have Mike Swogger and Courtney Marshall here with me from Swogger, Bruce, and Millar. And Mike, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you guys regarding Medicaid planning, how would they do that?
Phone number 947-6800, Traverse City, so 231. And our website is swoggerandbruce.com.
All right.
So there we are.
All right. Now, Courtney, I want to kind of dive in now because they've applied for Medicaid. Okay. Hopefully, they've come to you before, and you guys have helped them with that. Yeah. Okay. But now there's things that, and I want you to think of that husband-wife couple. One of them's going into nursing home care. The other one's back going to be home. What are the things they can? There's this what they call a spend down period, right?
There is. So before. This is where it gets a little complicated, but usually before we have a spouse apply for Medicaid, they're allowed to keep, the institutionalized spouse can have $2,000 or less in their name. Okay. The home is an exempt asset. Okay. A vehicle is an exempt asset. And then the community spouse is allowed to keep his or her income. So that's never going to go. If Mike and I are married, I'm not paying for his care. He's on his own. His income, that's what they factor.
Incomes get split.
Incomes are split. Okay. And so his income will go usually to his patient pay amount, which is the amount that he has to privately pay before Medicaid will pay.
Gotcha.
But as the community spouse, you are entitled to a minimum allowance or income each month.
Okay.
And those numbers are adjusted each year for inflation. But in 2019, the community spouse, you're allowed a minimum of $2,113 a month.
That's it.
That's it. And the maximum is $3,160.
Okay, all right.
So it's not a lot, but those are, the spouse is allowed to keep, obviously, all of her income. If she has income of $10,000 a month,
Okay, all right.
then the resource allowance, or those assets that a spouse is allowed to keep, the minimum amount is roughly $25,000, and the maximum amount is roughly $126,000.
Okay.
And the way that you arrive at those numbers is on the snapshot date. And again, this is where it gets technical, and so each case is very unique. But on the snapshot date, we look at all assets that a couple owns, and you tally that up and you divide it by 2.
Okay.
And the maximum amount then that they can keep is $126,000, and the minimum is $25,000.
All right. Is this that term I always hear, split the loaf kind of thing? Is it?
Not quite.
Okay,
That's
not a
whole
legal
different-
term?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's a whole
all right.
different planning. But
Okay.
that's the minimum, maximum, kind of the standard, if you will, before you actually plan
All right.
with anything.
All right.
Those are the assets that are exempt.
So what I hear you saying is they're going to look at all the assets, they're going to split it to give to the one spouse that's not going into nursing home care, right?
Right, then.
But only keep a maximum.
Correct. And anything over $126,000 is then where we have to do some additional planning.
Okay.
And that's where your half a loaf comes in.
Gotcha.
Or spend down. And so sometimes the easiest way to do that is if a couple does have a mortgage on their home and they still owe $100,000, there's $100,000 we can pay off the mortgage. It's not a divestment or a penalty.
Gotcha.
And it's going to obviously make it maybe easier for the community spouse then to live on the $2,000 a month or whatever she has.
Well, let's talk about that spend down stuff that you've identified all the assets. There are some things now that they can get out of there, right? That are legitimate, like you said, paying down on the mortgage. What are some other things?
A vehicle, so
Okay.
if they want to trade in a vehicle and buy an upgraded one, that's exempt. Prepaid funeral, so if
Okay.
you haven't already done that fun planning, you can do that.
Okay.
Certain home improvements, so again, the bathroom remodel maybe to make it more handicap accessible, or a new roof, heating, furnace, that sort of thing. Those are all allowable expenses.
All right. Well, Courtney, Mike, if anything, if our folks should get it, that planning is absolutely necessary in this regard, and having a professional, somebody that's focused on this on a daily basis is very valuable, right?
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. I hope you found this very valuable. Again, give those guys a call if it's some help you can use.